My name is Rick Firestone.
My name is Ben Bugale, and you're listening to pixelprojectradio, a video game and video game club style podcast where we talk about the games we play, the games we love, sometimes the games we just like, sometimes games we maybe don't like so much, but either way, we are here to discuss games, and today we have a very special friend with us. Would you like to introduce yourself, sir?
My name is Charlie Young.
It is Charlie Young, and now he's a friend of Richard's over there. You want to give us some Charlie Young? Although I think they've already got a little taste of him.
Yeah. Fans of the show and friends of the show will remember Charlie from our Lisa episode. Great episode. I had a lot of fun recording that and listening back to it. So welcome back, Charlie. We're super happy to have you here.
Thank you so much. Had a blast on the first episode. Glad to be, maybe taking a little bit less responsibility for this one. I'm just along for the ride, and I cannot wait to see where you guys take it.
Yeah, we really threw you into the test chamber, so to speak, in that first episode, huh?
We're all smiling.
That bad pun is a little wordplay, a little friskiness, a little glimpse into what we're doing today. We are tackling the landmark game Portal 2.
I think that's a fair word. I think landmark absolutely deserves to be used as an adjective.
Oh yeah. And before we get into that, we are recording this a few days before, but if you are an astute and timely listener, this is going to hit your feed on our 1-year anniversary. So Ben, I was hoping that we could just touch on that real briefly. One year. What is there to say?
It's been a year. I've played a lot of games that I otherwise wouldn't have played, and this it's been good to keep me accountable for the things that I want to play, and even forcing me to play them. So it's been good. It's been good to kind of go that route. Rick, how do you feel about this?
This has been a complete boon to me. I'm so happy to have this creative outlet with you and with our friends of the show like Charlie and Dave and Ryan and Brian who have been on before. When we were planning this, we set up our release schedule for the 10th, 20th, and 30th, so we kind of knew that this was coming, that we would be releasing an episode on our year anniversary. And like we're not going to make a big deal out of this. We're just touching on it for like another minute here. But when we were thinking about what to do, we wanted to do a landmark game. We wanted to do a game that we really liked, and if possible, we wanted to have somebody on that was a mutual friend. So check-a-rooney. We accomplished it all. I love this show. I love making this show. I love both of you, and I love these games that we're doing. Most of them, but certainly this one.
Yeah, this is due to a major fallout. This is our last episode as well. That's a joke. No, it's great fun. It is a great creative outlet. It serves me. It's good for me. And I think it's good for us. And Charlie, do you have any thoughts? What are your thoughts? You've been listening for a little while now.
Yeah, Charlie, give us compliments.
Make us feel good, Charlie.
Well, you guys don't need any more compliments, but I will tell you my honest experience with this podcast, and it is I got a gaming computer about a year ago, maybe a little bit more. Basically with the intention to play Minecraft, and because I just thought, it was kind of time. My laptop was dying. I thought I need to make an investment here. Might as well go a little bit more powerful and like be able to enjoy that as well. And that's probably the extent of what I would have done if not for starting to listen to your guys' podcast and really just like taking the deep dive approach and the care that you take with each game. And it gets me thinking, okay, now that I've got a rig that will actually run some of these games, I need to kind of get out of my comfort zone a little bit. And it's changed the way that I play games. I'm playing a lot more titles. I'm getting to experience a lot of that zeitgeist that is surrounding games that I just didn't really have a connection with up to that point. And I'm loving every minute of it. And you guys were the inspiration for that. So Honored to be here on your anniversary. It's come full circle.
Thank you. That's very sweet.
Yeah, thanks, man. We're super glad that you're here. That was really touching, and we hope that if the audience feels even half as much appreciation as I think you just outlined, that would make us feel really good. So thank you, and thank all of you for listening. We do this for us, but it's really great to have you along for the ride.
Yeah. So, Portal 2, huh?
Yeah. Enough with this sappy bullshit. Let's jump into the game. Portal 2. We got some listener responses on this one. So why don't we get our little sentence reviews out of the way, then we'll get everybody's reviews in, and then we'll sort of debrief.
I think our guests should go with their review first.
Guests always go first, as we set up that one time that we had another guest that was also Charlie.
Yep.
All right, here goes. Portal 2 is a knockout sequel that builds on all the strengths of the original game. It is a tightly packaged puzzler with fantastic mechanics built around an iconic core mechanic, with dry humor that hits just right from heavy hitters J.K. Simmons, Stephen Merchant, and the return of Ellen McLean.
Now, again, we know these numbers are arbitrary, but if you had to give it your personal score on a scale of 0 to 10, how would that look?
Jeez, I don't know. It's hard to give it anything but a 10, I think. It really is.
Yeah, that's fair.
Mm-hmm. You want to go, Rick?
Oh, sure. What is there to say about Portal 2? It's a landmark game by a landmark developer and is a masterclass in voice acting, level design, progression, and builds upon everything the first game set up for it. I'm with Charlie. It's a 10 out of 10, or as close as a 10 out of 10 as you can get. This is a near perfect game.
So I'm going to say this without knowing much about Portal 1, but having an idea of Portal 1, because I never played Portal 1. But I will say that Portal 2, and most likely all of Portal, has trailblazed with simple mechanics with a major twist. A game for anyone of any age, Portal 2 is a modest once-in-a-generation titan. Boys, it's a 10 out of 10 for me, too. I don't know, what is there to say about it? It kind of came in and gave us an original mechanic that, whenever we're like little kids, it's like, what would you rather be able to do? Do you want to have X-ray vision? Do you want to be able to fly? Do you want to be able to be invisible? All these different things. Here, Portal 2's like, surprise, bet you didn't know you wanted a portal gun. God damn it, they're right.
Yeah, I think the fantastic thing about this core mechanic is that it forces you to think differently about space, right? And that's what's so fun about it. Every single time you come up with the solution, it's like a little thing goes off in your brain like, wow, I came up with that. I imagined that. Yeah, there's something special about it. I love games like that, games that come after it, that use like non-Euclidean space and those things like Superliminal and a game I got done playing recently called Manifold Garden. Like anything that forces you to use space and gravity like differently than you're used to thinking about it, it puts you outside of your physical self and forces you to like grapple with a different reality, which is it makes it fun every single time.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've said it on the show before. Since we're still picking these games, we're not gonna pick real stinkers. That's why so often when we're giving these number ratings, we're always living in that sort of 6 to 10 range. But we catered this one. We wanted to pick a game, as we said, that was a real slam dunk, a real Babe Ruth. So here we are. Now, my dear friends, we've got some listener responses that I'd like to get through, and I'll begin us if you don't mind. We've got a little response from Jared Hess, who responded, and he has this to say about Portal. He says, "I like how relaxing it is to play. It's just a great game to play and listen to music." When I first read that response, when he sent it in, which by the way, like I agree with him, but when he sent that in, the first thing that popped into my mind is that scene where Wheatley is saying "fatty fatty no parents" at you. And I was like, yes, so relaxing.
It's very funny.
Oh, I can't wait to talk about these characters. This is going to be a fun episode, boys.
Oh yeah, good characters. Charlie, you want to read our first the first response?
Sure. So CEO of Gaming at T-Samps says,
Can't believe it.
I did. I thought it was great. I played it through solo and co-op. Definitely a forever classic game. If someone I know wants to get into video games, I'll always recommend the Portal games first.
It's completely fair. Also, I can't believe the CEO of all gaming. Unbelievable.
We've really peaked, boys.
Again, this is our last. No, I'm just kidding. So our friend Dave, right? He's Tales from the Backlog, right? Yeah, I thought it was Dave, the real Dave. He says, I think Portal 2 is really well paced with master level puzzle design that slowly builds on new mechanics. But the real surprise is that this is one of the funniest games I've ever played, which is a really hard thing for a game to accomplish. One of my favorites of all time. And that's, I think, Charlie, you mentioned the dry humor. Literally just levels me. Just it feels so British in the best ways,
Yeah, sometimes when people say, oh, this game is really funny, I have like my hackles go up a little bit and I'm like, what do you mean by funny? I'm not sure this will be for me. But this is like, this is head of the pack. Okay, this one comes from the Main Quest podcast, Keith from the Main Quest podcast, and he sent this in 4 different messages, so I hope I'm not getting this backwards, but here's what he has to say. It never quite hit the same chord with me as the first. The writing, voice acting, and puzzles were all there. It just seemed like Valve was striking while the iron was hot. I've heard a lot of people had fun with the co-op, but I can't say I had the same experience as everyone I've played with couldn't wrap their heads around the Portal mechanics. Have either of you played the co-op for this?
I did once.
I played, like an hour and a half of co-op.
Yeah, my experience playing the co-op was not an altogether positive one, but it was not the fault of the game. The co-op, we'll get into this with development, but the co-op was designed to be a little bit trickier from what I understand.
That sounds correct based on my memory. It's been probably 9 years since I did the co-op.
It's been 9 years since I did the co-op.
The interesting thing there is that aha moment that, and it's great because we're going to get to talk about this in the story as well, but that like little hit of dopamine you get from figuring it out, like that moment of realization, if you're playing with unequal partners, like somebody is way better at the game than the other, or like way faster at it, like one person is having a better experience than the other person. So it's really interesting.
Yeah, that is a tricky point in the game, isn't it?
Back over on Twitter, we've got the Big Drink Energy podcast. I think that's top 3 Twitter handles or podcast names for Rick Firestone, if I know his tastes correctly. So BDE says, top 5 game of all time for me, maybe top 3. I absolutely loved it. Great puzzles. It's fun. It's the first game I played that was outright hysterical. Simple yet satisfying backstory. What's not to love?
Yeah, shout out to Mikey from Big Drink Energy podcast. He was the one that joked that he was going to jump into this recording with a Wheatley soundboard, and that's why I put permissions on this voice channel.
That's funny.
I think you made the wrong call there, Rick. I think we should have been parachuted in with some Wheatley. That would have been... We'll throw it over to Ben.
Hi, everybody. It's me, Ben, again. We've got Eric, unlockables, and side questing. Literally, this is the shortest of anything I'm seeing, which is, quote, what if instead of 1 portal, we had 2 portals, end quote.
I've got some good news for you, bud.
Yeah.
And we finish up with Intergalactic Pinecone. I believe their name is Morgan. I hope I'm not getting that wrong, but they're a Twitch streamer by the same name. They say, Portal 2 is a bittersweet game for me. It signals the end of an era for Valve. After this, we wouldn't see them for many years with a single-player story-based title. The music, the writing, the acting, all of it feels like a culmination of what Valve learned up to this point. I'm glad we ended with that one because, yeah, I don't have much more to add on to that. That's a really great summation. Valve really did turn away from single player stories, not altogether, but to focus on sort of more social experiences, which is fine. They just really gave us something really good to end on, and made us wanting more.
Yeah, and you know, it's like the story is a big part of this game, right? But like more than anything, it's that sense of discovery. It's the limitlessness while you also still have some level of training wheels on. I mean, it's come on. Just come on, get real. Get real.
Thank you, everybody, for writing in. We try to do listener responses for the last game of each month. That is the episode debuting on the 30th. So keep an eye out for those on Instagram and Twitter, because we are going to keep doing them. So keep on sending it, baby.
Baby.
Thank you for the punctuation. Ben, do you boys want to jump into the development and release of this game? Or perhaps I'm putting the cart before the horse, because there may be some listeners who don't know what this game is.
Yeah, that's an important thing to talk about. Like, because we're sitting here talking about Portal, and we're talking about the mechanics, and we're talking about all of this jazz. But I think to kind of, we'll obviously dive deep, but to give you like a puddle's worth of a dive into this, you literally have a portal gun that has 2 different portals in it. And they basically act as doors you can launch anywhere and walk between them. That's the core mechanic. Those are the portals of which we are speaking.
We may have talked about this on the Tony Hawk episode, but this kind of taps into one of those childhood things that I think all of us used to do in some way, where we would, like, you know, on the Tony Hawk episode, for example, we would imagine a tiny little make-believe skateboard man like going along as we're driving in the car or riding in the car with our parents. This is kind of like that, like just imagining, oh, what if I go through this wall but I came out over here? Or what if I jump through the floor and the ceiling and I came out in the ceiling of the room that I'm currently... That was a mess of a sentence, but you know what I mean?
No, absolutely.
Yeah, I think I think that's part of what makes this game so appealing, is it's a very like childlike concept on its face, and then taken into the hands of Valve, who are just masters of level design. It's a slam dunk. It really is.
Charlie, you called it a puzzler. Do you think it's fair to call this a puzzle platformer?
Yeah, for sure. Your aim is to get from A to B, and there's elements of, there's a lot of elements of directionality, verticality, momentum, which we'll get to talk about. I'd say the like single saving grace of like the concept of this game, that like quality of life wise, is the lack of fall damage. Really makes you like uninhibited to just experiment with what is possible in each of these levels. But yeah, I think platform puzzler or puzzle platformer, totally appropriate.
Yeah, we've truly come full circle. Our first episode was on Witcher 3, where if you fall more than a foot, you die. And in this game, you can tumble stories and you're totally fine.
Yep, that's true. For those of you who haven't played Portal 2, but you've played some more contemporary games, and I know maybe one of these 2 games isn't terribly contemporary, but Portal and Portal 2 really, when we talk about blazing the trail, I think one of you mentioned superliminal. Very much that feel. Also feels very similar, in my opinion, to the Stanley Parable in design, in feel, in atmosphere, etc.
It's got that very intentional humor that's never in a rush to make a joke. It's never in a rush to get to a punchline. And that's part of what makes this humor so fantastically good, is its timing. Let's talk about the humor for a second, because that is just so ingrained into what makes this experience good. Replaying this, we didn't really get into our histories too deeply, but I played this in high school when it first came out in April of 2011. And this, I just remember me and my friend group being so enamored with the humor that we would try to emulate it, whether it was stealing jokes verbatim or just trying to make jokes in this fashion. and most of them were very derivative, but it gave me a real hit of nostalgia playing through this because it just shaped what I found funny in high school in such a big way. It's irreverent, it's very deliberately timed. Their use of verbs is very funny. Like at one point they mentioned during testing they will deploy smooth jazz to encourage being calm, but that use of the verb deploy smooth jazz is just endlessly funny to me.
Yeah,
and that happens a lot.
Yeah, when Cave Johnson says we're going to make science. But absolutely, the timing, that's why the voice cast is so important to the humor of this, because they are masters of comedic timing. So their delivery is really what makes it. I mean, the writing is fantastic. I mean, that's why I almost didn't get through this game, because as I started making notes for this podcast, I would stop the screen like literally every 7 seconds to write down what was going over, what was coming into my earballs. But so eventually I had to stop and just say, okay, literally every bit of this is hysterical. I can't just write the script down as I play or I'll never finish it. But it's that, especially Stephen Merchant, like when he delivers a line and then trails off and then there's 2 or 3 more little, anyway, like whatever it is that he's captured in his jar of comedic gold is what gets you through this game for sure.
It's dry as the Sahara, excuse me. And if you've got to, if you like things like the Mighty Boosh, if you like things like Monty Python, if you like things that are of that or Peter Serafinowicz, you're going to like the humor of this game tremendously. And it doesn't work very hard, but it will say some things. Again, I love the way that they use the words, yes, but I love the way that it'll set up some things to be like, it's going to be bigger, it's going to be scary, but then it ultimately makes fun of itself, but not like in this drenched, oversaturated, big old stupid punchline way, but it kind of falls flat. I don't know. It's not quite anti-humor, but it's its own masterpiece.
Yeah, precisely. Charlie, you mentioned Stephen Merchant. He's a British comedian, I believe, but he's one of the 3 main voice actors that we have in this game. I had read that the developers and the graphic designers pulled a Robin Williams as Genie kind of deal and just let Merchant do a bunch of ad-libbing, and then they just animated it in later based on what they all thought would fit in the script. And it works so well because it's animated incredibly well because as we'll come to find out, Wheatley, who Stephen Merchant plays, is pretty much just a robotic eye, and it's still animated in a very convincing way. But all of those ad libs and those stutterings and those trailing offs that Charlie mentioned, it's just so organic and it's so irreverent and British, I guess, is a catch-all term to use. It's the culmination of all of this works so well. Yeah, I'm always gonna love it.
Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't know that he was given license like that, but it makes total sense when you think about shows like The Office and Parks and Rec, like where basically you set the scene and then you give these fantastic improv comedians free reign to let's do 10 takes and we're just going to cut together the funniest shit you've ever heard. Like, it totally makes sense that they got what they did out of this if they're giving license to the people who know comedy better than anyone.
And it's so organic this way, and to tailor the game around that, I think, is better. I mean, it is why Genie worked so well. And it's funny you mentioned The Office, because Stephen Merchant directed and wrote some of those episodes. So that's well done.
Oh, that's right. I thought his name sounded familiar to me.
Mm-hmm. He was also in the UK Office.
So getting into sort of the development and the release of this game, it is a sequel, obviously. That's what the 2 in Portal 2 stands for.
What? Sorry.
Yeah, Portal was my father's name. So Portal 1, this just baffles me to this day. Portal 1 came out, I believe, in 2007 in a package called the Orange Box. And this was by Valve. and it was this collection of games including Team Fortress 2, Half-Life 2 Episode 2, and then they included Portal 1 as a sort of bonus content thing. All three of these games are just masterpieces in their respective mediums, and I just like thinking about 2022, I can't wrap my head around what that would look like today. That's just the most insane, and you regularly saw it at GameStop for like $15. It's the most insane thing. So much quality in one tiny package.
Oh yeah.
But it was a pretty long turnaround for the time, because Portal 2 released in April 20th of 2011, which at the time, that's 4 years. That was a bit of a long time, and they started working on Portal 2 pretty much immediately after number 1 released, because of how positive the playtest reception was, how positive the critical reviews were, and just how much the developers liked it. So they got to work right away. It came out initially on PS3, Xbox 360, and interestingly enough, Windows and Mac at the same time.
They really weren't messing around with release of this, huh?
Yeah, no, it seems like they weren't. I saw that this got a port to Switch this year in 2022, but I did not bother to confirm that. Ben, you're the Switch master.
I'm not sure about that. I wouldn't play it on Switch, which is not me trying to knock Switch, but I played it on my PC. The first time I played it was Xbox 360, though. What about you guys?
Yeah, I played it on PC, mouse and keyboard.
I played it first on PS3, back when I had a PS3. For any of you listening, any of you kids listening, don't sell your consoles as new ones come out. You'll wish you didn't. But this time I played it on PC. I did it both mouse and keyboard and controller, just to see which one I liked more. We'll talk about that as we go. Another interesting thing about the development was they tripled their size practically, or quadrupled their size, because math is difficult. They went from a team of 7 or 8 on Portal 1 to about 30 or 40 on Portal 2. So it was just this massive, massive uptick. And one thing that surprised me reading about this was originally Portal 2 wasn't going to feature portals.
What?
It's half of the name. It's a sequel and it involves portals. And they were like, we're not so sure about that portal bit.
Interesting. So I wonder if this plays at all into the turnaround time that we saw. I wonder how far into development they got before they thought, you know what, why fix what ain't broke?
I wonder too, I had read that they were playing around with this thing called an f-stop mechanic. I couldn't find anything like really nitty-gritty about what that meant, other than it was like a sort of a camera mechanic, an aperture mechanic, if you will. But after playtesting feedback, they pretty quickly said, no, let's actually do portals.
I will say, knowing that they had a small team and then went to a big team and still produced this, really impressive, because sometimes too many cooks can spoil the broth, but not the case here, good God.
We'll talk about it too, because there are a lot of people that consider Portal 1 to be a better game than Portal 2. I don't know how you both feel about it. I think Portal 2 does have its shortcomings. I think they are very minor, and I don't think it detracts in a meaningful way. But I wonder if that too many cooks analogy you made holds true at least a little bit.
What do you feel like those, like what area are we thinking those shortcomings are?
I'll elaborate more when we get to it in the story, but specifically in Act 2, when they start to scale things out to be huge in the underground original Aperture facility, it felt to me like it kind of cramped the pacing a little bit and made it a little too... It took away the streamlined nature that made the puzzles and the test chambers so addictive to me.
Yeah,
that's all.
I feel that.
But a minor thing, very minor thing.
I just wish that between levels, when you're not solving a puzzle, but you're just going around on catwalks, that you could sprint. That's my one quality of life that I wish was capable, especially when the story is insisting that you run.
And I saw that, and I thought of that too. And if you do watch yourself through the portal, you can see that you are kind of in like a light jog at any moment. Mm-hmm. But I also realized the reason, and I agree with you, but I also realized that the reason that they don't allow the sprint is for use of a few things that come later in the game.
Yeah, for sure.
It's just amazing the parameters they put on it. That's, it's limitless, but there are still walls to hit. You know what I mean? And it's hard to find a game this well manicured.
And we're hardly the only ones that found it to be very, very well manicured, because the reception of this game was largely close to perfect. Like 10 out of 10s all around, a lot of 5 out of 5s, a lot of 9.5s. I didn't see anything lower than a 9 in my looking. Did you?
No, everything is either over 90 or over 9. Like 9 out of 10 is the lowest technically.
Mm-hmm. And it won a bunch of awards, was nominated for a bunch of awards. It's just a very well-beloved game. Why don't we jump into Ben and Charlie? You were both mentioning the movement. Let's talk about the mechanics a little bit. So you're playing once again as Chell, the protagonist from Portal 1. They reworked her visual design a little bit. In Portal 1, you did not have fall damage either, but players were like, how does she not take fall damage? So in this one, they gave you special boots that kind of, I don't even know how to describe what they look like spring boots.
To me, they sort of look like, I'm going to say this name wrong. Who was that South African Paralympic sprinter? Or maybe he was actually in the...
Pretorius.
Yeah. And he had like no legs from the like mid shin down maybe. And he had sort of like these blades that were curved almost at a gradual, they like ended in like a 90-degree angle from where they began. And to me, they kind of look like that on the outside, like they supplement your legs to like absorb shock.
Yeah. That's a much better description than spring boots.
It's Pistorius, my bad. Praetorius is the other guy that we all three know. But there's a Torius.
That was one visual change. The other visual change is the orange jumpsuit that Chell was wearing in the first one is now taken off from the top and tied around the waist. This is bizarre to me. This became like almost a scandal at the time, where people were saying it was overtly sexy. I really do not understand that argument. I think it's ridiculous.
Yeah, I'm trying to count the number of times I saw myself in this game. And like you catch glimpses, but unless you're deliberately placing portals to like stare at this, like the visual of the player character almost does not enter into the equation.
Almost not at all, really. Yeah, you're exactly right.
Yeah, I don't know. I saw it cited, so I thought I would bring it up. I think it's not even a thing, but anywho's it. Yeah, like you both mentioned, you can run, but not sprint. You can crouch, you can jump, and that's really all the mechanics that you can do in terms of your body movement. You can also fire the titular portal gun. Portals from the portal gun.
And you can pick up and place objects, and you can press buttons. I think those are the last couple of things that you can do.
Yeah, and I mean, that's when I talk about the simplified mechanics around the time of the review. Like, I mean, you move, you can jump, you can crouch, you can pick things up, portal gun.
Everything is super intuitive. I mean, I tried again to get into Red Dead Redemption 2 recently and failed to get into it. But part of the issue with that and similar games is like the complexity of the number of things you can do makes it so hard to remember how to do any of them that it's like you never build a rhythm and it never becomes fun. And this is so limited, and they use those limited mechanics so effectively and combined in enough ways between you and the environment that you don't need to be able to do a lot of things, and the simplicity makes it fast and fun. Um, the movement and mechanics don't need to be in your way because you're meant to be spending your time puzzling out how to use the environment to achieve your goal.
I want to come back to that point whenever we touch on level design, because I could not agree more. But for now, I mentioned portals, and Ben, you had alluded to these earlier. Do you want to sort of go into detail about how these portals work?
What I was kind of talking about with like the doors earlier.
Yeah. How would you explain these portals to somebody that's never played the game before?
So there are specific surfaces throughout the worlds in which you function and move and live. There are certain surfaces that are generally, they are presented as clean, white, rectangular surfaces. And these are places to which you can latch your portals. Your portals kind of apparate from your gun, and you watch them kind of soar through the air. And whenever they hit a target that they can cling to and make a portal, you see an ovular sort of shape appear that tells you that you can go that way. And also interesting to think about is the fact that the portals are blue and orange, which are the colorblind friendly colors in most games. Rocket League and even in Call of Duty, you can switch your colors to orange and blue. So you fire one, you have to find another surface. If you want to use that portal, you have to find another surface that's at least one of those white rectangles. It can be any size white space, but you put your other portal there, and then you can, voila, go to that place you couldn't reach previously because of what your portal gun can do. You can also put objects through these portals. It's not just you who can go through them. You can drop objects through. You can take objects through. There's almost no limits until there are, but that deals with like doors. Certain doorways will reset your portals and take them away, etc.
Yeah, some other important things to mention, like you maintain your momentum when you go through the portals, and one of the great things, and it works most of the time, and but the reorienting to where gravity is, so like your feet sort of reorient towards down when you go through a portal. So if you happen to place a portal on the floor and then place the exit portal on the wall, obviously you'll be oriented differently in the portal you're entering to the portal you're exiting, but the game flips you so your head is right side up. Now sometimes that can be disorienting. It depends on how different the two orientations are, but it happens quickly enough that usually within a second or third try you can figure out where you need to be facing when you get out the other side.
Yeah, the biggest amount of disorientation I got from the way they handle those physics is like being on top of a ledge, wanting to get to the ledge across the room, and then placing a portal below me and then below the other ledge, and sort of jumping down, because then whenever you come out of the portal on the other side, your feet go first, and you have to sort of reorient in the air. Otherwise, I think it's handled really well. It's really intuitive. The game corrects for a lot of that orientation weirdness, so you rarely have to worry about it. It's not like a Sonic game where if you tap the control stick when you're in a loop, all of a sudden you're kind of SOL. I mean, they really considered everything that could go wrong, and they worked around it.
Yeah, I can't imagine what that playtesting like this was, because I can imagine so many ways that this could be handled poorly, and I'm sure they encountered all of them and more than I can think of. But good on them for really being thorough and handling that issue of orientation.
Thorough and consistent, because it would be easy to make you be able to do like front flips and back flips and stuff in this sort of disorientation, but holy cow, for you to be able to do anything and not become nauseous, I would imagine that they actually have to make you like a cat with your feet always ready to land on the ground.
There are some other mechanics that come in through the use of objects or gels. The gels in particular are an addition to the sequel. We can maybe talk about those when we get to them in the story. Do you think that'll be okay?
I think that's fine.
So in terms of visuals, what did you think? How would you guys describe the visuals here?
For non-cell shading, it is aging very well. You're aware that you're playing a game, don't get me wrong, but how it feels and some of the textures and the way that things are inconsistent throughout, like some of the bent metals, I don't know, I feel like it's aging well, and it's just going to age well. It's real enough, you know?
Yeah, it's like a quasi animation that I don't want to call it age proof, but playing it in 2011, playing it in 2022 when it came out in 2011, it still feels like a modern game. Like, had I had no knowledge of video games and I sat down to play this year alongside of, I don't know, Horizon, I would say, oh yeah, these are similar. These are within 2-3 years of each other.
Yeah, and you don't get the idea that it's going for maybe the atmosphere that a modern open world game can get with its, flora and fauna and, fog effects and all of like those depth things. But everything it does, feels intentional and feels like we did everything we needed to do. And for that reason, I feel like it holds up really well. Now, when you look at, this morning I played like 15 minutes or 20 minutes of Aperture Desk Job, which is the recent sort of almost like Easter egg. Like it is a game. I didn't get through it, but I think it doesn't take very long. But it's almost like a little vignette set in the Aperture. So you get some similar visuals. You get like another core that is supposed to be sort of the same like eyeball robot that Wheelie and GLaDOS are. And you can tell that they've come a long way in like rendering those visually, but I don't think it detracts at all from the visuals as they hold up from Portal and Portal 2.
I don't have anything to add. No.
Let's talk about sound design a little bit, including voice acting and music. The music was composed by a guy named Mike Moraski. He's a veteran Valve composer. He's worked on all the big boys: Team Fortress 2, Left 4 Dead, Portal 2, Counter-Strike Global Offensive, and Half-Life Alyx. He's also a visual effects artist that has done stuff for the Lord of the Rings and the Matrix series. I thought the music in this was much stronger than the first one.
Yeah, and it's not too invasive. You know how sometimes you can get games, and I we like music. The music is such that it's not something that would, I think, stand on its own brilliantly, but it's very wonderful and atmospheric. I don't know. This is part of why it's a 10 out of 10 for me. It all just fits, you know?
Yeah, I think atmospheric is a great descriptor. This game has so many other strengths that to like glob on music that calls attention to itself would feel distracting almost. So for me, I would not call this music memorable. But it was effective in its implementation. I would say one of the few things that I did notice about the sound design that I really enjoyed was there's elements of the music that like add intensity, and it's like I have to imagine mechanically what's happening is you've got a multi-track recording, and those elements that like add heightened suspense or like faster rhythm are just muted until you start getting closer to your goal, and then those get like panned in to the sound or faded in, and it's a little, if you're not paying attention, it's like a little subliminal, like you're getting warmer, you're doing it right, you're going, you're doing the thing, and it just like it adds suspense and like anticipation to that moment of dopamine when you realize I've solved this level. And I thought it was a really nice detail.
It is subliminal because, to be honest, I couldn't sing you anything from this game. Like, I don't know, like a lot of games I could like sing you at least some sort of melody from, even stuff that is in the background. Not this one.
They do a really good job, Charlie, touching on the idea of momentum, of using music and sound as a way to show you that you're going in the right direction or doing the right thing. Oftentimes, like if you're directing a laser beam into a socket, you're going to hear these arpeggiations, and those arpeggiations will build if you do the next thing correctly. And it's just really, really well done. Again, I think Valve is a master studio in terms of level design. I would call this music maybe not memorable, but I wouldn't call it unmemorable. The exception being, of course, the final song. Jonathan Colton returns. He composed, or was part of the composition team that did Still Alive from the first one, and returns again for an ending credits scene with a song sung by GLaDOS called Want You Gone. It's very good.
Yeah.
Like, just unironically, like I could listen to it.
In both of the games, these are some of my favorite moments in the game. I mean, just normally the end credits is a moment that you might spend reflecting on like what you've just done, or you might just be like, okay, how do I get back to the menu at this point? But these, they keep you engaged. And I remember like my experience with Portal 1, when I got to that, I was just like, I was glued to the screen as because the words are coming up as she's singing them. So you've got a visual component that's keeping you engaged with the music. But yeah, I thought it was wonderful. I would classify the ending song in this one, gosh, now I'll have to be reminded of what it's called.
Want You Gone.
Mm-hmm.
Want You Gone. Thank you. To me, I was like, this is so much of the era. Like, if it wasn't GLaDOS singing it, I could totally see this being a Sum 41 song. It just took me right back.
You're right. It's funny because it's true.
And perhaps it's those elements that do mark it as at a point in time versus other, you know what I mean? Because if you were to put this game again up with Stanley Parable and Superliminal and say, okay, which of these is the oldest, which of these is the newest, I'd have to take a little bit of a look. The Superliminal is so clean, though. That's the only thing. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. One other thing while we're on sound design, the sound of movement, the sound of the portal gun shooting, the sound of the facility shifting, because the facility is in its own sense a character and is alive. That's all very good. We've got to talk about the voice acting. Mm-hmm. Charlie already kind of alluded to this before, but the three big voice actors here are Stephen Merchant as Wheatley, J.K. Simmons, which I did not know until today, as Cave Johnson.
Oh, yeah.
And, of course, Ellen McLean as GLaDOS.
Here's an interesting fact. You're not breathing real air. It's too expensive to pump this far down. We just take carbon dioxide out of a room, freshen it up a little, and pump it back in. So you'll be breathing the same room full of air for the rest of your life. I thought that was interesting.
Did you know, Richard, that J.K. Simmons dated a certain professor at IUP?
Go on.
J.K. Simmons dated Dr. Mary Logan Hastings at one point.
Get the fuck out of here.
Not even kidding. Not even kidding. If you go into her office, she gets Christmas cards from him and his family every year. And is that J.K. Simmons? And she said, yeah, he's one of my old boyfriends. Like, that's awesome. Are you serious? Like in every year, there's like a new picture of him in the office.
Oh my God.
So there you have it.
That's incredible.
Yeah, but it's definitely J.K. Simmons kind of going the route of, who he is in the Spider-Man with Tobey Maguire movies.
That's exactly where my mind went. Yeah.
That gruff, masculine, America kind of sound to him. It's, I don't think of him with voice acting, but he's incredible as a voice actor. Just brilliant.
Yeah, and I think, so both of the guys in this voice cast, I mean, when you think about their acting careers, I mean, I think it's fair, at least to an extent, to classify them as character actors. And like when you think about that, like that's the perfect type of person to bring into a voice acting position, because they're going to bring affect. Like it's going to be stylized, right? It's going to be highly stylized. Everything they do is going to be memorable and consistent.
And I have to say, I love the intentional choices of each of these characters. Like, I don't know. And you know, I'm very curious to hear what you guys thought of Ellen McLean. We've talked a little bit about Stephen Merchant and J.K. Simmons here. Ellen McLean, though, with that sing-songy, the way that her voice fluctuates and it's stepwise, sometimes it sounds as if she is singing. It's really, there's something that, like, I don't know. I love that. I don't know how you guys felt.
The history behind that is, it's so funny to me because it's so like, you hear it and then you say, of course that's how it happened. But one of the writers was also working on Psychonauts at the time, and they were going around getting like just members from the office to say random voice lines. But then they ran out of people, so they started putting the voice lines through text-to-speech, and people started thinking it was hysterical. They didn't care what it was saying. They just thought the text-to-speech was funny, and they were like, all right, that's better than our writing. Let's just do that. And that's kind of where GLaDOS's auto-tuned voice came from.
That's funny.
Yeah, and that auto-tune, I think, also places it in time, because you can think back to, like, T-Pain or whoever, like,
T-Pain.
it's like she's delivering the lines almost imitating text-to-speech with that, like, random rise and fall, and then they go back behind it and actually auto-tune it. Excuse me. I have to imagine that's what they did, where they go back and auto-tune it so that it just locks in those pitches a little bit more than a human could do. And man, it's the perfect effect.
And while it's artistically done, it's still very monotone, almost deadpan like for the majority of the time. And I think that makes it all the more, I don't know, my ears just magnet to that. Now, did she also do the voices of the little robots? That's what I'm... Like, was she what's the word I'm looking for?
Oh, the turrets?
Yeah, was she the turrets just, like, pumped up a few steps?
I don't know. I didn't look for that information.
Because the turrets themselves, there are turrets that will fire at you in this game, and they have their own little voices. They sound like a variation on GLaDOS.
Yeah, it may just be a similar process, but I'm not sure.
One thing that I think I read regarding McLean's voice acting technique is, like, before they put it into the autotune, she sort of she's a trained singer from what I understand, and she would try to imitate the pitches, but then they hyper autotuned it, which I think gives it more of that really precise, almost cold quality, which is perfect for GLaDOS because, like, it's sterile and it's cold, which is good because she is cruel and merciless.
I was going to say sterile and cold. Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah. And it works with her little jabs that she deals out to the player throughout the two games.
I have a surprise. It's like all of those.
You are a horrible person. We weren't even testing for that.
So I have a question this may be for Rick, because you played Portal 1. And so you were familiar with GLaDOS when you started Portal 2. But the first character that you encounter after the announcer, who's obviously human, is Wheatley. So the voice acting style is so different. Like, and they're supposed to be similar in ways, in like conception and background. Like, did that throw you at all that it was so wildly different from the voice aesthetic that GLaDOS had, taken through the whole first game?
Thinking back to when I first played this as like a senior in high school, I probably didn't notice. So that's coloring a lot of how I see it now, is just because that's how I've seen it forever. It's just Wheatley. I could see it being like, not a flag going up, but like my attention being like, oh, he's different. Why is Wheatley different? And I think maybe that was intentional because, spoiler alert, skip ahead a couple seconds if you don't want to hear this just yet, but for a lot of the game, we think Wheatley is the protagonist.
Yes, we do.
And he's not. So maybe it was a sort of bait and switch? I don't know.
Yeah, he definitely is set up as a foil to GLaDOS, both in the voice acting and in the story in the first act.
Mm-hmm.
But I would say, I think, thinking back, because this has only been a few months since I played them for the first time, maybe 4 or 5 months, it felt jarring, and then it was so funny that it didn't matter anymore. Like I didn't think about it past that because of how engaging it was.
Guys, I found something. The person who was the voice of the robots was D. Bradley Baker, who had done robotic voices for the Star Wars Clone Wars media.
Wow.
So that makes sense to me. He was also in Halo, Star Wars The Bad Batch, Rebels, the Clone Wars, all this jazz. Kind of cool. Destiny, Overwatch.
Interesting. So now you've got me further curious because there's the default turret voice and then there's the dud turret voice.
I love the dud turrets.
that I cannot find. But yeah, apparently Extra Robot's voices were D. Bradley Baker. So I don't know. But the fact that we have these robots that do have human personalities and tendencies like in Star Wars, I don't know about you guys, that just friggin' kills me.
Yeah, and it adds to the sort of like, I'm just going to say Portal humor and hope that people know what I mean, because like the turrets will say, "Are you still there?" as you're walking around. But then also if you get a hold of them, they kind of go, "Oh no," as they're, dying and exploding.
Self-aware droids, man.
Yeah, there's okay, I know we can't say every line that happens in this game.
We're going to say that, and then, Charlie, it's going to be like 3 o'clock, and it's like, well, this was a great episode, everyone.
Yeah.
Good job.
Wheatley laughing, our handiwork. Shouldn't laugh, they do feel pain. Of a sort. All simulated, but real enough for them, I suppose.
I think, isn't that when they're the quote unquote duds are being thrown into the fire pit?
Yeah, the incinerator.
Yes. And as they're falling in, they're like, "Oh no."
Like, whoa, hold on. And like some of the droids are like, I'm fine, just let me be. Like, they're all very like...
I love that the dud turrets that can't perform their shooting well also are characterized with a voice that are like, "Hey, how you doing?"
Oh, that's the best part. They have I don't know how they ended up with like that New Yorker sound. Like that was such a decision.
Oh. Well, before we get into the story and just sort of go through the levels and the major story beats, is there anything that we wanted to touch on before we move on?
I don't know. All I want to say is, for those of you who are hearing us talk about this game and are kind of confused, go play the game. We always say that, but it's hard to explain this game because it is its own force. We can't say, oh, well, it's kind of like Skyrim, or it's kind of like Time Splitters too. Like, no, it's,
Good contemporary reference with Time Splitters too. But you're exactly right. Like, if you're listening to this, first of all, thank you. But if you haven't played it, it's worth a play. It's not long. Portal 1 can be done in 2 hours. This one, if you know what you're doing, 3 to 4. Although I think most people, their first playthrough takes about 8. It's not long, and it goes down smooth. Definitely play it.
Very satisfying. Going down smooth, that's nail on the head, baby.
And just one last thing as we get into story, just kind of segueing out of the sound design and voice acting that we are all so enamored with. The great thing about it is that you kind of get this 3-act structure that also sort of, in each one of those acts, you get your companion, whether they're actually there or however you're encountering the voiceovers, is sort of like tied closely to one of those acts. So not only are the visual elements, tracking with each and changing with each act, but the voice acting sort of like flavors and characterizes each one of the acts and just adds to the memorability of the whole experience.
That's an astute observation.
Well, gentlemen, it seems like it's about time. Without further ado, why don't we jump into the story of Portal 2. Charlie had mentioned this towards the beginning, but it's worth pointing out again. We're not going to be able to point out every single quip, joke, and wisecrack, or jape, or insert your favorite term here. We're also not going to describe every single test chamber and every single puzzle, because that's not something we would want to listen to, and it's not something we want to make. We'll point out the good ones, though, as much as we can.
We will. And again, listen to it in the game when you play it.
Yeah, there's a really good developer commentary mode that you can play. As you unlock chapters, you can go through each chapter with little developer commentary. It's very good, and it's very insightful. They probably have a compilation on YouTube if you don't want to go through the game and do it. But yeah, super interesting.
I just can't believe they had that kind of foresight that that this game ended up being this big of a deal, and then there's commentary too. Like, it just doesn't. It'd be like watching Lord of the Rings with commentary. Like, it's sick, you know?
That's something that I would be very interested in doing, if I'm being honest with you.
Oh, yeah. So, go ahead.
Yeah, go for it. No, after you.
I was going to say, you kind of wake up in this, and I'm reading this, and this is exactly right. It really is just like a super dingy motel room. There's no other way to describe it. There's a rail in the ceiling, which is how Wheatley does enter, I will say. But the first things that we hear come from an announcer who's wishing you a good morning and that you've been in a suspension for 50 days in compliance with state and federal regulations. All testing candidates in the Aperture Science Extended Relaxation Center must be revived periodically for a mandatory physical and mental wellness exercise.
This is them explaining how the basic controls work. And it's very good, because they have you look up and down, and then they have you walk to a painting on the wall, and then they ask you to stare at it to appreciate art. And then a buzzer goes off, and it says something to the effect of, if this did not reinvigorate you, please reflect over this classical music, which plays for about 3 seconds before another very loud buzzer. It's very funny.
Good, now please return to your bed.
This is art. You will hear a buzzer. When you hear the buzzer, stare at the art. You should now feel mentally reinvigorated. If you suspect staring at art has not provided the required intellectual sustenance, reflect briefly on this classical music. Good.
What?
Then they teach you how to jump. Then we get introduced to Wheatley, right? So he comes banging through the door, and he's like trying to figure out how to help you, basically, through this revival process.
Yeah, he's coming through the door because your next wake up, which should have been in another 50 days, is actually occurring on 99999 repeating days later. So everything's in shambles, and that's when Wheatley comes busting in to save the day.
And he is a good guy.
Yeah, and he's here to help, and to do that, he's going to need you to be able to communicate with him. So he says, please say apple. And the screen says, press space to say apple. At which point you just jump. It's like, no, you've just jumped there. Here, try this. And he tries to get you to do a few more things, and each time you just jump.
He's like, no, that's not quite. You're just jumping again. It's so funny,
yeah.
And it's a great tutorial. You know, like, it makes fun of itself. You know what I realized we didn't touch on? The fact that your character has no voice whatsoever. I think that's one of those intentional Legend of Zelda decisions, like Link doesn't have a voice, so that you can really be the character.
Yeah, that makes sense. The game touches on it at the very end, but I would imagine that the developers just didn't want to take attention away from the puzzles or also Wheatley and GLaDOS, but I'm not sure. I actually didn't read anything about that.
Anyhow,
Wheatley steers your entire room block out of the air. I'm noticing that I misspelled the word steers, and I just want you both to know that I'm very self-conscious about that. He sort of steers your entire room block out of the area because an evacuation notice has been sounding with a buzzer and everything. Thank you. I see you correcting other
Go
spelling
team.
mistakes. This is making me feel very welcome.
No, I just looked at it and I said, wait, that's not how pedestal is spelled? Like, I just looked at it and went, what? How is it actually spelled? So that's why I changed it. I'm learning.
Do you guys,
We're all learning.
Are you familiar with the IT crowd?
I love the IT crowd.
A pedal stool.
Rick, have you seen the IT crowd?
I am ashamed to say I haven't.
I'm going to change your life later. We can talk about that in time. But the humor, yeah. No,
That show
That's a
does not
45
age well, but it's still worth checking out.
It's a 45-minute conversation to come off of that. So, but yeah, he does kind of override and take your room away with you in it.
Yeah. And you sort of end up in this really rundown, overgrown with fauna and foliage testing area. These are the areas from Portal 1. You're back in the original testing areas, and this is sort of serving as your quote-unquote tutorial. The devs decided, hey, we can't, just assume that everybody's played Portal 1. Let's give them a super condensed version. And that you are. You're introduced to cubes and the portal mechanics here before you actually get your gun. And one thing that I forgot to touch on when we talked about the visuals is the UI of the portal gun is great. It's not just a standard crosshair. It's got the sort of like portal logo-esque thing, and it indicates when you've got a blue portal out and when you've got an orange portal out, and when either of those portals are not active as well, which is such a help as we go on into later areas.
Yeah, they thought of everything.
Yeah, I like this first little area. The way that it gets you started is by only giving, when you finally get the portal gun, you only get the access to the blue portal. And the orange portals are either pre-placed or placed by using some buttons, which only occurs in this one area, but it really limits your focus on, okay, we're gonna put the exit for you, and you're gonna just have practice putting the entrance. And they go by so quickly that it doesn't feel patronizing. It just feels like you're zipping through, but you're learning all the time.
When this happened, Charlie, so all three of us are teachers in some way, shape, or form. When this happened, what I thought about was, well, first of all, I had the thought, Valve is really good at teaching you how to play this game. The second thought that I had was, I was like, why is that so? And it's because of the experimentation. I remember when you and I were in school together, Charlie, I was teaching some undergrads some stuff and you were teaching them, and I was going very much by the books and like, here's the resources, da-da-da-da-da. And I remember talking to you specifically about learning the upper register of the saxophone, the altissimo, and you were like, yeah, one of my core philosophies of teaching is experimentation and just letting them figure it out and having me say, why did that work or why didn't that work? And first of all, that changed the way that I taught and continue to teach. But second of all, that's exactly what they're doing here, is they're giving you the mechanics, and they are admittedly setting you up on some sort of rails, but they're largely just letting you figure out how stuff works, and that is so good.
Yeah, there are very few instances, if any, of instructions in this. And they have ample opportunity, right? They're in a facility that's designed to be tested. You have voiceovers from announcers who are literally testing you. There are areas where there's writing on the wall, literally. And they don't take any of that as a chance to point you in the direction. But and again, we'll talk about level design at some point, but the levels are designed in a way to intuit the answer and teach you. And so they start more obvious and progress to less and less obvious at a rate that's easy to like keep your learning keeps pace with that, so that you continually feel challenged.
Here. Isn't it after this, the first portal gun moment that we have the smooth jazz deployed?
Yeah, I think the quote is something like, this next test is very dangerous. To help keep calm in the face of certain death, smooth jazz will be deployed in 3, 2, 1.
I'm going to find it. Yep, to help you remain tranquil in the face of almost certain death, smooth jazz will be deployed. Exactly, and then the countdown. I love it.
Also in this area, while you're sort of lurking in these old levels. In fact, like the moment that you get out and I think get access to the other side of your portal gun, you end up in this little room that's like, it's got cave paintings on the old like portal panels, those white rectangular panels that Ben was talking about. And it kind of tells the story of Portal 1. And on the last panel, there's like you in the center of it, like being like surrounded and almost praised. So you're sort of set up as like this myth or legend. It's a really cool little Easter egg if you pay attention.
I did not.
Yeah, there's a lot of that in this game and in Portal 1 too. There's Portal 1, as well. There's a lot of little hidden rooms like that. It's very cool. Just to push us along a little bit, in the sake of time, Wheatley is sort of still guiding you. He says that he will die if he comes off of his rail, but he's willing to make that sacrifice. He does not die. No. But now you can proceed to her chamber, and she'll probably kill you both anyway. So he is, of course, referring to GLaDOS. Her name is an acronym that stands for Genetic Life Form and Disk Operating System. She's the villain from Portal 1. Chell, a.k.a. you, bested her via death. It's, I guess, the way to say that. You killed her in the first one. Wheatley sort of recounts this to you because he doesn't know who you are, and it's like this almost a legend, almost. But you eventually get to her chamber, and whoopsie-doopsie, Wheatley accidentally powers the whole place up and wakes her up. And GLaDOS is excited to see you again and to begin testing for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
Yeah, when you're in that chamber where you accidentally turn her on, Wheatley's like, don't touch anything. Don't even look at anything, except for the escape. Okay, I know you got to look at it to find the escape, but just turn it on and then don't look at anything else. You press one button and then the whole platform rises and starts flipping on every switch in the room, which is like, tens of meters tall. There's hundreds of thousands of switches on the wall, and you've just flipped them all on. It's a classic Wheatley moment.
This takes us into Chapter 2, The Cold Boot. This is where we're sort of introduced to these reflecting cubes. They're little cubes that are used to reflect lasers, which I think the game calls discouragement beams.
That's correct, I believe, yeah.
Which is endlessly funny. What I really liked about this area is, like, you not only have to reflect the beam with the cube, but you've got to set up a portal underneath of the cube once you're done, so you can grab the cube off of what it was reflecting, so you're able to go up a stairway or an elevator or whatever. It's a little difficult to put into words, but if you've played the game, you know exactly what we mean by that.
It's very, very satisfying using these cubes. But those discouragement beams, they will hurt you. No fall damage, sure. But these lasers, they can kill you.
Yeah, that's the one thing to point out. One criticism I've heard of this game is you don't have a health bar, so you don't know when you're going to die. That's fair. It takes quite a bit of lasers and turrets to actually kill you, but you can die. So
I think this is another one of those teaching by experience things. Like, you're going to die a few times in this game. It's never a really big setback. And yeah, it's basically if you take enough damage in a short enough period. But if you survive whatever sort of damage you're taking and manage to get out of the way of it, like step out of the laser or get behind a wall so that you're not being shot by a turret, you're back to basically full health. Like, you get that same window of sustained damage in a short amount of time the next time. Like, you're not close to death for the rest of the level or whatever. So the health bar kind of seems unnecessary and keeps the UI really clean.
A lot of the puzzles in this chapter, I don't want to say are variations on a theme because they all have their own personality and their own challenges to them. But generally, that's just it. You're just, you're doing these tests for the rest of your life. And that's basically what this chapter is GLaDOS having a field day with challenging you time and time again. At the risk of, diminishing this chapter too much, that's really what it is. It's kind of reacclimating you.
Yeah, it very much sets up like a Portal 1 experience. I think from a story perspective, we didn't mention, like, when GLaDOS wakes up, Wheatley is gone. I can't remember exactly how he exits. I don't know if she disposes of him or he just like rolls out of the way or whatever, but he's no longer your companion. GLaDOS is the one you're interfacing with. But at various times when you enter new levels or as you're exiting levels, the rooms are not completely like enclosed and polished like they were in Portal 1. There's obviously like time decay, and things are like running down, and so panels are missing, so you can kind of see into the guts of the facility. And every once in a while, Wheatley is popping up visually like he's trying to re-establish contact with you. So he's working behind the scenes to sort of like get back with you so that you can start working together again.
Yeah, good point. I forgot to mention that. These next, we're introduced to a couple of new mechanics here. We've got a sort of light bridge that allows you to walk on it, as it says, as well as what's called a faith plate, which is a springboard mechanism. It's introduced with a quote that has a real purred happily cadence to it. They were designed to test how well subjects could solve problems flying through space. The results were informative. They could not. It's just very good. It adds a new level of platforming because you are using these to springboard and grab blocks out of the air. It's very good. Charlie, as Charlie had said, Wheatley kind of peeks into these test chambers now and then. At one point, he drops bird eggs into some machinery to sort of halt the standard operating procedure, and breaks the next door. While GLaDOS is gone fixing it, he says, we're going to escape. Just hang tight. I'm going to get you out of here.
We also have the chapter known as The Return. That's chapter 3. Is that when the escape happens, Rick? Or is that chapter 2?
Yeah, I kind of glossed over chapter 3 because I forgot to write it in my notes. But that's sort of where we've been.
Yeah.
We're leading up right now to chapter 4,
Yep.
which is titled The Surprise.
Right. The surprise I remember very well, because GLaDOS was talking about how she had found other people with the same last name as you in the testing facility, and she says, she's like, wow, I was looking through the records, and there's 2 people with your last name. And then, that last chapter ends before that, and she goes, I have a surprise for you. And then, it's implying that these 2 people are your parents. Yeah, you walk into the dark room, lights come on, and it's like a boiler room. Like it's nothing. It is what it is.
I lied, and confetti just goes, boing.
Comes right out of a tube onto the ground. They abandon you, so I seriously doubt they would want to see you anyway.
It's so cruel, but so flat and funny.
It was. I thought for a moment that I would see another person in this game, but not unlike the Stanley Parable and Superliminal. No other actual humans to be found.
There's a gag where, as part of the anticipation for the surprise, she tries to call your parents on the phone, and you get that system operator or whatever picks up and says, the birth parents you are trying to reach do not love you. Please hang up.
It was so funny, and I was like, wow. And it was clearly her voice pitched down.
Yeah. And she goes on and she's like, wow, I didn't even know the phone company had that kind of information. It's like...
Wheatley does reappear, though, and he asks you to just hang in there for a few more chambers. He turns off the power during a test and opens wall, helps you escape.
Yeah, when he does this, he appears while GLaDOS is there, and he's talking in this ridiculous American accent. Like, hey there, I'm gonna help you escape. She can't understand me when I talk at this frequency. And she's like, I can hear everything you're saying.
It's out of this world funny.
Yeah, Wheatley, he's not a smart guy, which is important. But as you escape, GLaDOS sort of begins to crush the entire place. And she throws some turrets your way, and you kind of just get past them. No huge deal, and you hop into an elevator. This takes you to Chapter 5, which is appropriately titled The Escape.
Escape.
Spicy. We've got Wheatley sort of taking us through a manufacturing section. There's some light platforming here and there. And you're ultimately trying to get to the factory area. You do meet up with Wheatley at the turret facility. You find the control room for turret testing. This is where Wheatley, or maybe it didn't start here, but Wheatley throughout the game will hack stuff, but he tells you to turn around because he can't do it when you're looking.
That's right.
And this time he says, we've got to get into the turret room. I'm going to hack the door, turn around. I'm nervous. I can't do it when you're looking at me. So you turn around and he just busts the window. And that's how he hacks that door. But the goal is to you're sort of sabotaging GLaDOS. You're taking away her two big weapons, her turrets and the neurotoxin. So the first one, you've got to get rid of the master turret template. And to do that, you sort of replace it with a dud turret. That's what we talked about earlier. The way they check that is basically have the master turret say hello, and the turret says hello back. If it's a dud and speaking in like a gruff accent, it gets tossed into the incinerator. But we switch it up. So now all the working turrets get incinerated, and all of the dud turrets that are speaking gruffly, they get pushed through.
And it's worth mentioning that the dud turrets are unshelled. They have no armor on them either. That's a good way that you can tell. After you sabotage this, you have to shut down the neurotoxin facility, which you do by portaling a laser. What is it? A discouragement beam. You use that to cut all of the tubes that funnel into the neurotoxin tank. So you're preemptively preparing yourself for an encounter with GLaDOS.
This was a pretty satisfying solution because there's this conveyor belts of portal surfaces that you can use that are sort of swinging by. And when you figure out that you can place a portal with a laser on it, and the laser will basically be, transported across the room and like coming out perpendicular to the conveyor belt and just slice through all of these tubes. It's a really cool visual moment and satisfying solution to that puzzle.
I remember when I first went through this, I actually thought the solution was to wait for Wheatley to do it. And there is a lot of ad-libbing that Stephen Merchant does. Like, I sat there for a good 3 minutes just listening to Wheatley talk. And then I was like, oh, I actually have to... Okay, that makes total sense.
Yeah.
But you do, exactly as Charlie said. You slice those tubes open. Warning blares saying that the neurotoxin levels are dangerously unlethal, which for some reason causes the entire place to collapse, and you and Wheatley sort of get sucked into a chute that's going to take you to another area. Visually, this is super cool, especially for 2011. This looks fantastic.
It's like the Monsters, Inc. Doors scene, you know what I mean?
That's exactly what it is.
Yeah, I really dug it. You are sucked into the chute, and again, Wheatley is just riffing the whole time, just kind of talking until you are separated from him.
If I'm not mistaken, before you get separated, you pass through a section of the Aperture facility where you're seeing all of these displays from Bring Your Daughter to Work Day.
That's right.
And it's like a science fair sort of presentation setup but they're all the same project. It's they're making potato batteries, and so you walk by all of these little trifold poster boards with potato batteries in front of them.
One of them is actually Chel's, I believe.
Oh, I did not catch that.
Yeah, like it's got her name on it.
No idea.
Who knew? But those potatoes turn out to be relevant pretty soon. You portal down into a room. It's just a tiny 4x4 with a door that says GLaDOS Emergency Shutdown and Cake Room, which if you've played Portal 1, you're privy to what's about to happen, but that door is fake. You try to use it and she goes, ha ha ha, I tricked you, which pulls, and she pulls you towards her in this little glass box because she's going to kill you. You're done. But dun dun dun, the turrets don't work. Then she says, no problem, I've got this neurotoxin, but dun dun dun, no neurotoxin. Instead, Wheatley comes out instead of the neurotoxin. He just kind of tumbles back in. And this is where we get this warning that there's an unstable core.
And you have been tasked basically to, power down, change out everything, like, because they put themselves in a stalemate between Gladys wants one thing, obviously, and the other robot, Wheatley, wants another. So it's up to you to fix that. And after you, Charlie.
Well, in order to shut down Gladys, a replacement core is required. And so this is when you get the option, okay, well, we've got Wheatley here, so we can just go ahead and switch them out. And that's when that stalemate occurs. Obviously, she does not want to be ejected, and obviously he does want to be her replacement. That will give him all the power he needs to help you out of this place, which has been his goal this whole time. But that's when that stalemate occurs, and so you have to basically hit a plunger to... You're like the stalemate... what is your title? Like the stalemate arbitrator or something?
Something like that, yeah.
But obviously she's putting up barriers to prevent you from doing that, so you have to puzzle your way around that to get to the override, which then ejects her and Wheatley takes her place.
This is a really well done scene too, because it's the first time we see GLaDOS showing any kind of emotion. Like it sounds like she's in genuine pain and shock as she's getting ripped out from her core, and Wheatley is kind of being pushed in. But yeah, GLaDOS's quote unquote head is kind of on the floor, and now Wheatley, his little eyeball, is in its place. And it turns out GLaDOS was right, because Wheatley immediately begins to go mad with power. He starts talking about how you're so small, and he keeps fixating. He's like, "You're so small. Why are you so small?" And then he's like, there's no reason we have to go right now. We could do a little more testing. And it's at this point that GLaDOS kind of says, "Hey, I know your voice. Your original design was to be an intelligence dampener inside of me, so the engineers could control me better. And you felt like a tumor filled with horrible ideas. You were designed to be a moron."
Yikes! Yikes!
Which pisses Wheatley off to no end, and he kind of goes Hulk mode and starts punching the elevator that you're in, shooting you down into this endless or seemingly endless fall, which is Chapter 6, titled The Fall.
I just want to make a comment on that scene before we pass it up. I mean, this scene is so effective, and I really think it's the voice acting that carries it through, but that moment of transformation is just gradual enough that you can see the gears turning in Wheatley's head. And he starts to display his power visually on the screen. He starts manipulating all of the panels and the room you're in, and he starts flexing his brain power. He speaks fluent Spanish. And after he does, he says, "I don't even know what I just said." And if you look up the translation, it says in Spanish, "You are using this translation software incorrectly. Please check the manual."
Unbelievable.
But yeah, this is one of my favorite scenes. You're right, Gladys, showing that emotion, the first time that you maybe are sympathetic to her, even though you have no right to be. But I wrote, GLaDOS electronic corrupt auto-tuney scream is horrifying.
Wait, what if this hurts? What if this really hurts? I didn't think of that.
Oh, it will. Believe me, it will.
Are you just saying that, or is it really gonna hurt? You're just saying that, aren't you? No, you're not. It is gonna hurt, isn't it? Exactly how painful are we?
No, stop! No! 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 No!
Wow! Check me out, partner. We did it! I'm in control of the whole facility now. Whoa! Would you look at this? Not too bad, eh? Giant robot. Massive. It's not just me right here. I am bloody massive, aren't I? Oh, right, yeah, the escape lift. I'll call it now.
High drama in this scene.
Yeah.
For being so funny earlier. The fall, the Chapter 6, the fall literally starts with just a fall. and it's you and GLaDOS falling for a very, very, very long time.
One thing that we didn't mention is that before Wheatley goes Hulk mode, he gets pissed that GLaDOS calls him a moron and attaches GLaDOS's core to a potato.
Yeah.
And as you're falling here at the beginning, this is where we get the famous line GLaDOS says, "Oh, hi, how are you doing? Because I'm a potato."
It's a perfect line. Yeah. Yeah, and GLaDOS, tells you a lot of things. I mean, it's comedy in and of itself, the fact that the fall is just happening. Like it's not ending. It's almost like an old cartoon, you know what I mean?
One of the things that she tells you is that Wheatley is the product of some of the most intelligent minds to be the dumbest possible moron that you just put in charge of the entire facility, followed by a slow clap, which is pretty funny.
And she's glad that programming still exists. I loved that. Like, my slow clap still works.
It's so funny how antagonistic she is. I really love it. You crash land into this really dilapidated and destroyed area, which turns out to be like the original Aperture Science Center. This is where I mentioned at the beginning. This is like one of the only nitpicks I have with this game. At this point, we still have our test areas where we're like doing the puzzles for the tests, but to get between them becomes a puzzle in and of itself because the scale is just so large, and it felt tedious to me. If there wasn't so much good voiceover from Cave Johnson, I would have probably genuinely disliked these sections. It felt tedious. That's all I'm gonna say about it.
Yeah.
These definitely gave me the most trouble. There were several moments where I thought, I just don't know how to do this. And then when I finally saw what I was supposed to see, it was obvious, but it was so far away and so covered up in busy visuals that it was hard to pinpoint. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Just in the interest, please bring pizza pronto. I should have done more of that before we started. In the interest of sort of streamlining some of this, some of the mechanics that are introduced in this area are in the form of these gels. These gels, I've heard different things. Some people like them, some don't. I don't like the white gel. I'm ambivalent about the other two. They come in 3 colors. Blue gel causes you to bounce. Whatever momentum you have prior to bouncing is carried through. So if you jump from the ground, you go, 6 feet. If you jump from 20 feet in the air, you bounce up 20 feet in the air. That's pretty cool. There's orange gel, which causes you to gotta go fast, makes you run super fast. More of a sprint, we should say. It's like very fast. And then there's white gel. The white gel lets you make portals anywhere that the white gel is touching. This feels a little out of character because so many of these puzzles are so well designed that having a mechanic like this to just put portals wherever you want, it didn't work for me. It felt like too much. I don't know. What did you guys think?
It depended. I liked the fact that there was a point where you had to make portals go, portals to make more portals. I thought that was cool, but otherwise I didn't like it either. It's not, and I know I gave it a 10 out of 10. It can still be a good piece of art without me liking every element of it.
Yeah, there were parts where the implementation felt tight and purposeful, and parts where it felt sloppy and looked sloppy because you're literally spraying these gels around the levels, and the bigger the levels and the more surfaces, there's one in particular where literally the only thing you have is a broken pipe of white gel and a bunch of surfaces that cannot be portaled, and so your only recourse is to basically spray the entire area and then start to spray it up these 2 columns, and that's the one that took me the longest and felt the least streamlined, especially compared to the pace of the rest of the game. It really halted in some of these moments, and on top of the visuals that are intentionally sloppy, but it's just such a contrast. I don't know that it works in all cases.
In the spirit of... Oh, go ahead, please.
I would say just like to balance that out, some of my favorite uses of the gels were where you had to use all three of them in combination. Some of those did feel really satisfying to me.
In the spirit of condensing things a little bit, I will say that we get, the first time we hear Cave Johnson, his voice is great. He's, this vigorous dude.
Cave Johnson was the guy behind Aperture Science, and the first voiceover, which is J.K. Simmons, the first voiceover we hear from him says, "They say science is built on the shoulders of giants. Not here. At Aperture Science, we do all our science from scratch. No hand-holding," which is such a 2020 American thing to say. I heard it and I was like, holy shit, this is prescient.
Yeah, it is. But that's the first Cave Johnson we hear as we go through the labs, which there are different years on the wall that tell you where you're kind of, living, what you're going through. You hear that Cave Johnson is aging and kind of getting sick and dying from exposure to certain things in the lab. Yeah, and not to rush too much, but that is, the condensation of everything. And GLaDOS, Cave Johnson has somebody with him named Carolyn, who seems to be his partner, his assistant of some sort, and GLaDOS is trying to figure out who in the world she could be.
Yeah, she can't figure out why she's sort of ending or repeating Carolyn's sentences at the same time, and she can't figure out why she feels so strongly towards Cave Johnson. Sometimes she says like, "Oh, I've got to think about this," but then she says, "Oh, I can't do that because that takes more than 1.5 volts of electricity and I'm a potato."
That's right.
I was just going to say, while some of the level design in these feel, we've shared our thoughts on those, to balance that out, or to I think the thing that carries us through is that the pacing of the reveal of the Cave Johnson Carolyn dynamic is really well paced out and really holds this part of the story together.
Yeah, it is really well paced. Towards the end, as Ben alluded to, Cave Johnson is sort of, his voiceover has become a lot more, not condescending, but crass, and he's much more angry. He has this one meltdown to which GLaDOS is like cheering him on, going like, yeah, he's saying what we all are thinking. Jesus.
God damn it.
But it's really touching because towards the end, yeah. It's touching because towards the end, he's saying that they're working on putting personalities into machines, and we should have been doing this a long time ago. And if I die before you can put me in a machine, I want you to put Carolyn in charge, even if it means putting her in my robot. He's very clearly ill at this point. And then it ends with him saying, all right, that's all. You can go back to your desk. And real GLaDOS, not recording Carolyn, says, "Goodbye, sir." And it's like, it's funny. Well, it's not funny. It's really tragic because like she eventually says like, there's clearly something wrong with me. Like I don't know what's going on. And it's like, it's kind of funny, but it genuinely made me feel sympathy for her.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing how much this chapter and the next chapter start to give you enough backstory on GLaDOS to really start to sympathize with her in a way that you never thought would be possible based on the first game and this game up to this point.
This whole time you've had Potato GLaDOS. This is all through Chapter 6, the fall, and Chapter 7, the reunion. The reunion is when you pick her back up. The goal is to get to Wheatley, because GLaDOS has the idea after seeing a poster, which I gotta say, I love these posters. There are so many of them. I particularly like the one that says the blue repulsion gel was originally a dietary supplement. But her plan is to give Wheatley a paradox, because robots can't help but ponder paradoxes, and if she is able to say it without listening to herself somehow, Wheatley will self-destruct. I remember even as a high schooler thinking, no, Wheatley's too stupid. He won't care. But we see what happens. We see what happens in Chapter 8, which is coming up, titled The Itch. So, Wheatley is back. We're face to face with him again. he has created hybrid turret / cubes that look like little hermit crabs because he's so bad at testing, and he says that they've been at it for 12 hours.
Yeah, 12 hours to get them to crawl onto a button.
GLaDOS does attempt to get him with the paradox. She says, this statement is false. And Wheatley says, yeah, no, that sounds good. So
he's just too dumb for them.
This is where Wheatley starts talking about, like, you know, you're going to test with him now. And he's like, I get this itch whenever I don't test. And I get this immense relief whenever I do. And it's this sort of drug. And GLaDOS does say later that this is exactly what's happening, that your body sort of develops a response to it, but also builds up a resistance to it. Mm-hmm. She said she could handle it because she was in it for the science. But Wheatley is Wheatley.
Right. And this is interesting backstory on her because, like, she was programmed. I mean, she's the intelligence of Caroline put into this robot, but at the same time, it's not just her. It's all of this. She's given all of this programming to let her handle the facility, but part of that is to be programmed to need to test, right? So she's programmed with addiction. And Wheatley kind of, you know, so that's outside of the core. That's whatever he's plugged into. So he gets that addiction whenever he's switched into there. I thought it was a really interesting parallel. Exactly. The addiction between the testers that are the antagonists of this series and the sort of like little dopamine rush that you get whenever you figure out a puzzle. It like really tracks with what Wheatley is feeling and talking about through the beginning of this chapter.
Gosh, yeah.
So you begin doing some tests designed by Wheatley. The first one is literally the first test from Portal 1, I think, where you push a button and a cube falls directly onto the switch. Wheatley has a bit of a Sundeer moment here where he's like, oh yeah, whenever you do that. So he forces you to do it again, but he doesn't get any reaction. So he's already building up a resistance to this. You do another test of Wheatley's. It's literally just a copy and paste of GLaDOS's, except he wrote the word test on the wall, which is pretty funny. All the while we're getting these messages that the core meltdown is coming. We get alarms. We eventually get blue screen of deaths whenever we exit elevators. So bad shit is going down. But what Wheatley's doing is he's not getting that dopamine rush. So he's thinking, I'm going to bring you closer to me, to my chamber, so you can test, and you're closer to me, and I'll just get more of that hit. So he doesn't know what the hell is going on. And GLaDOS is like, yes, let's run with this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the visual style is breaking down. It's actually a lot akin to the opening scene where he's just ramming your little compartment like through the Aperture underground because he starts out stealing her levels, then he starts kind of making adjustments to her levels, and then eventually he's just like ramming two test chambers together, and it's all, while the gameplay is still satisfying and feels streamlined for the most part, like the visual style is just like getting more and more harried, and he's spiraling out of control.
Yeah, it's very chaotic. It's just very clear. Like GLaDOS is a monster, but she was good at what she was doing. Whereas Wheatley, ever being the foil, is the exact opposite.
He's
really
Joker.
Yeah, I was gonna say it makes you think, doesn't it, about like the wrong people in power and the wrong people in power. I don't know. This game, as much as you're focused on the puzzles in this game, there's a lot of things to really contemplate.
I wouldn't be surprised if there were like academic papers written on this.
For sure.
Me neither.
I would love to write a paper on, I mean, if I had more expertise on Cave Johnson as like an indictment of like hubris, and, you know, immediately all the testing brings me right back to like, oh, the CIA will just give people LSD and see what happens. Like the whole thing has that vibe to it. Aperture
Science's new MK Ultra Light. Wheatley keeps talking about how I may have misnamed that. Sometimes I get all those CIA conspiracies mixed up. Wheatley has been talking about a surprise that he's got for you, and he keeps saying like just a few more chambers, but he tricks you. He has you step on a faith plate to to solve a very easy puzzle, but it actually throws you in a different trajectory, putting you onto a sort of tractor beam that we've been using in these later tests. They just serve as like automatic movement beams. He brings you face to face with him again, and he says, "Hey, I've found these 2 testing robots," which, GLaDOS has alluded to before talking about Aperture Science and Cave Johnson. "I found these 2 testing robots. I don't need you anymore, so I'm going to kill you." And that immediately brings us to Chapter 9, titled "The Part Where He Kills You."
What a chapter title. Just, it's, again, so dry.
It's so on the nose. He's got you on a platform surrounded by walls with spikes, which he says, like, eventually I'd like these to shoot fire. It's like, okay. He says there's no way you can escape. And GLaDOS says, "Hey, dum-dum, there's white conversion gel dripping directly below you. We can portal out of here." And Wheatley's like, no, you're wrong. It's not there. Nope. And of course we end up doing just that. We get out of there. He keeps trying to smash you, using turrets on you, but they're all duds. Nothing he can do at this point can get you. That's basically what we're feeling like as we're running away from Wheatley. This is where GLaDOS has the line that she's like, "This is the first time in my life that I don't have any cores attached to me, and I'm not hearing them. I'm just hearing my own voice, my own conscience." And she's like, I'm saying this truthfully. I'm not going to betray you. I really think there's something wrong with me. And it's funny, but it's also like, oh, this is kind of sad.
So we're ultimately headed towards a final confrontation with Wheatley, which has a very similar feel to the final confrontation with GLaDOS, but he's supposedly learned from all the mistakes that she made, and so he's like come prepared with some counters to the things that you might throw at him. So he's got shielding that's supposed to protect him from bombs, although you are able to trick your way around those. With the all 3 gels come into play in this final one, and your goal. So on your way there, you pass a room full of corrupted cores. It's just like they're all kind of stacked up in this room behind some glass, and they all have a few quippy little lines or interesting personalities. One that just keeps saying, "I'm going to space. I'm in space. I'm going to space. Got to get to space." And he might get to do that one day. So you hit him with bombs a few times to reveal, make him vulnerable, and you start attaching these corrupted cores to force another stalemate situation.
Yeah, and it only takes 3. And this is where a stalemate occurs. It's funny, the stalemate thing asks GLaDOS if she's ready, and she says yes, and asks Wheatley, and he says, "What do you think?" And it says, "Ambiguous response detected. Substituting, yes." But of course he says like, no. So you have to press the button again, the stalemate button, but surprise, surprise, it's booby-trapped. Wheatley booby-trapped it. It blows you across the room, knocks you down. So you're on the floor, you're looking up at Wheatley. He's going mad. The roof is crumbling, and we see the moon. And it's like front and center. And if you've been paying attention to the Cave Johnson recordings, the white conversion gel was made of moon dust. But even if you weren't, it's front and center. It's the exact same color as the gel. So you shoot a portal onto the moon, which causes a vacuum, and it pulls you and Wheatley into space. You've got him by the core. Like he's not attached to the arm in any way that's going to help him. GLaDOS comes in, saves you, pulls you back in, and Wheatley gets sucked into deep space. It's so cool. Like having that moment where you're like, oh shit, like I've got to shoot the moon.
Yeah.
Very cool.
The way that they crafted this final scene, I mean, it's such a cool concept for this conclusion. Like, I don't know how, I don't know. All praise to Valve for the concept on this. I mean, the concept's throughout the game, but there's something special about this moment here. And to tie it in, like to know that that's what they're working for, so that all of the Cave Johnson stuff is like alluding to that, but you would never guess that's what was, in store for you. It's just really fine.
Yeah, and I mean, a lot of times you see a game like this that has done such a good job of being delicate with the story and how you get to the points. Sometimes they can really bungle the ending. I don't think that's the case here.
Hi everybody, Future Rick here. During the day of recording, Charlie had an obligation that he had to get to, and we were having such a good time recording that time just flew by. So, Charlie did have to take off. He won't be on the remainder of the recording, but we just wanted to make sure that we said how thankful we are for him. He's been an incredible friend over the years, and it just means so much to us for him to show the support that he does for our show. And for the Portal episode, we couldn't have thought of anybody better to bring on and share this really special episode with. So we wanted to make sure that we thanked him appropriately here on the episode. So thank you, Charlie. We appreciate you beyond words. All right, let's get back to the show. So after you wake up, you sort of get knocked out because you were almost hurled into space. You wake up and Atlas and Peabody, the two co-op robots, are standing there. Those are the two that Wheatley found. They're there with GLaDOS, and she says, like, oh, thank goodness, I'm so glad you're okay. I've learned such a lesson, and I've learned that you're my friend, but I learned an even more important lesson, and that's where Carolyn is stored in my memory. And then immediately you hear a robotic voice say, Carolyn deleted. And she's like, thank goodness.
Oh my gosh.
So she finds where her conscience is and just wipes it. But, she says that she thinks that the easiest solution is always the best. And at this point, killing you would be way too hard because ever since you've come into her life, you've been nothing but trouble. And she says, you crazy mute lunatic, just get out of here. You're gone. You ride an elevator up and you come face to face with turrets. You have this moment where you're like, oh shit, she tricked me because it's GLaDOS. But no, the turrets end up singing like a classical music song. And you really get to leave, for the first time. In the Portal series, you step outside into a field of wheat and blue skies, and behind you, a nice little call out from the first game, a singed companion cube, your first and only true ally, is pushed out. Credits roll.
I need to play the first one.
It's, as a game, it's not as good. To get all of the lore and just kind of like appreciate how far they've come, can't recommend it enough. I mean, it's always very cheap on Steam, and it's a 2-hour experience.
Oh wow! Okay.
Even if you don't know what you're doing, it's very short. Yeah, and that's the end of Portal 2.
Right on. Right on.
I know Charlie had to take off due to an obligation, but what are some of your parting thoughts on this game?
Again, I played it forever ago and didn't really remember much from it. I don't know, it's just, I don't want to say it's fragile in like a bad way, but it's just I know I used the word manicured earlier, but it's been very well cared for. It's aging well. It's going to age well. I don't know. I feel like anything I could say has already been said.
I think what I appreciate now more than ever, having, started to think about games as actual pieces of art and not just funny distraction time, I really appreciate the level design and how Valve approaches teaching you how to play. That is just, it's stellar. I cannot gush about it enough. I do think the pacing in those the Cave Johnson sections where you're underground, that's not great to me.
I would agree, and I understand the variety that they give you and present you with in the game, but I'm not wild about it either.
Yeah, but it's such a minor. It's such a minor nitpicking point, and also, like you just said, there is a lot of variety. So it was never a spur in my ankle, in my heel, so much so that I would stop and be like, this sucks. It's just like, as I'm thinking about it, it's like, yeah, that was tedious.
Yeah, and it really was. That whole section was.
And speaking of Portal 1, there is also a free webcomic that you can read. It's not an ongoing series. It's just a one-off comic, about 20 pages or so, called Lab Rat. I think it's Lab Rat, singular, not Lab Rats. That sort of gives some background on Aperture science. That's pretty cool. I skimmed it this morning. I'm going to go back and read it for real. But yeah, a lot of lore in this series. It really goes to show you how much people genuinely care about this, about these two games that collectively take 10 to 12 hours.
Well, and these games is, they have very much, I'd say, a cult following. Like, they think that they are recognized for the impact they've had on the gaming community, but they're very, they feel kind of indie in a way. You know what I mean? Like, they feel like their own thing.
I think that's a testament to Valve, because, like, Valve is a huge company, right? Like, they own Steam. Like, they're the big boys, and they still don't cater to, like, what AAA games, quote unquote, demand. Like, they make the games that they want to see, or at least they did. They're not as active anymore. That's just incredible. Like, that's why I really wish they would make more stuff. I know they've got their own focus, but, their own focus is, I guess I should say. But yeah, it's just one of those once in a lifetime games.
Full stop it is.
Full stop. Yeah, so if you're here, thank you for listening to the whole episode. Thank you for one wonderful year of letting us talk at you. Ben, I can feel comfortable speaking for you for a moment if you'll let me. We both love this a lot.
I'm going to let you speak for me. Go ahead.
What more is there to say?
Nothing.
This is a project of love and passion, and I'm so thankful I get to create it with one of my best friends of all time, and I'm thankful there are some people that seem to like it.
It's mutual, pal. And yes, those of you who like this, we appreciate you. If you know anybody who you think would like this or likes to get, either excited and agreeable about games, you can share us with them. Or if you have people who are really critical and want something to rage against, you can also send this to them, because we might have opinions they differ with, but we do this for ourselves. And, I think we do it because we know that you're out there too. And we hope you get something from this.
And we want to give one more special thank you to Charlie. It just has one of the smartest and funniest people I know personally. Talking with him is always a blast, because he always challenges me in terms of how I think. And beyond that, he's a very good friend, very dear friend. So, we wanted to say thank you once again to Charlie Young for stopping by. Youth Beast, EUPHBEAST on Twitch. I don't know how active he is anymore, but check him out if you want. In addition to sharing us with your friends, you can also give us a rating and or a review if you so please. We got a new one that I'm going to read now. This is from KG Unit on Podcast Addict. And KG Unit, I think I know who that is, but I'm not 100% sure. They say, wonderful podcast hosted by a couple of wonderful video game guys. 5 stars.
It's very nice of you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. We're happy to have you.
There are a few ways they could find out more about us, isn't there, Rick?
That's right. You can reach us on Twitter and Instagram. Those are the 2 social media places. Twitter is @pixelprojectpod. Instagram is @pixelprojectradio podcast. But if you search Pixel Project Radio, we're the only one with that name as far as I know. So we'll come up either way.
We have a Gmail. It's pixelprojectradio@gmail.com.
It makes me laugh that one always comes up before the Discord in every episode.
I just want people to angrily or happily write in about things so that I can hear people's opinions through the email. I don't know.
We've gotten plenty of feedback on Instagram and Twitter about our episodes. Never a single email, which is fine. Don't get me wrong, but it would be funny to see one come through and be like, I thought that stunk.
I'm waiting.
Sincerely,
Gary@hotmail.com.
Damn it, Gary. Ben, you're right. We do have a Discord. That invitation is set to never expire, and it's in the show notes. I also post it all the time on social media. So do it up.
Well, Rick?
In the name of science, I think we should call it a day.
I think so, buddy. It's been a pleasure, and thank you all for listening, and we hope that you'll listen to us the next time, eh, Rick?
Sure hope so. My name is Rick Firestone.
My name is Ben Bugale.
We're signing off this time. See you next time.
She was a lot like you, maybe not quite as heavy. Now little Carolyn is in you too. One day they woke me up so I could live forever. It's such a shame the same will never